2-week tour, you said that China feels 50 years in the future after returning home. What specific experiences or sights, tastes, sounds, during your visit gave you that sense?
Everything.
一个美国人来中国2周，回去以后说了一句话：这里像50年后的未来。这句话最有意思的地方，不是他夸中国有多先进，而是他其实把美国最尴尬的问题说出来了。美国还能追上中国吗？注意，不是美国有没有钱，不是美国有没有科学家，也不是美国有没有大公司，美国这些都不缺。真正的问题是，美国还会不会把一个国家该建的东西建出来？这个美国人到中国以后，第一眼看到的不是抽象的制度，也不是宏大口号，而是机场机器人、城市夜景、平稳的高铁、可以折叠的手机、车里的按摩座椅、到处都能用的数字支付。这些东西放在中国人眼里可能已经有点習慣了，但放在一个美国人眼里，它会变成一种冲击。原来现代化不是写在新闻标题里的，而是会落到普通人的每一天。
Actually, from moment one, from the airport, you had the robots that were waxing the floors in the airport. A shock to my system to see that, but throughout the entire trip, I could just see in terms of the little technology that people had, their phone that unfolded 3 times maybe on the airplane from somebody, or the incredible smoothness of the train, the car that picked us up at the airport, it had massagers in there and a whole bank.
所以这一期的重点不是外国人又夸中国了，这种表达太浅，真正值得看的是一个美国人亲眼看到中国以后，开始反问美国自己，为什么中国能在这么短的时间里把这些东西铺到生活里？为什么美国明明曾经是基础设施强国，现在却连高铁、核电、宽带、城市建设都推得这么难？他讲得很直接，他不是说美国要复制中国，而是说美国应该像科学家一样研究中国，研究中国从2008年以后发生了什么，研究中国怎么把建设速度、产业能力和普通生活连接在一起。这句话其实很重要，因为在西方媒体里，中国经常被当成一个需要被解释、被审判、被警惕的对象。但这个美国人换了一个角度，如果中国做成了某些事情，那美国为什么不能学习？这种态度比很多所谓战略报告更诚实，因为美国最难接受的可能不是中国变强，而是中国把美国曾经最擅长的东西重新做了一遍。修铁路、造电站、建城市、铺网络、发展制造业，这些本来不是中国发明的，也不是美国陌生的，美国当年就是靠这些东西崛起的。所以这段访谈的反差在这里，一个美国人到中国后看到的不是一个完全陌生的文明，而是看到美国曾经相信过，后来又慢慢放弃的那套建设逻辑。
A peaceful relationship for improving life was something that was always in my mind. However, what I want to say about China in that respect is that it's become clear to me that China is on a hyperbolic trajectory in terms of that growth. So for me, I immediately want to say to the United States and to my fellow Americans and politicians, we have to go and we have to learn how China did this relatively fast. Because 2008, which we can talk about later, was not that long ago. And from 2008, if you just take that window of time, it's dramatic what's happened in China. And then I look at the lives of people in the United States, it hasn't been quite the same. The benefits and the advances, the things that make the life here more convenient, well, they're not quite there. So I think it's important for us to act like scientists and go study what is it that made this civilization, which is thousands of years old, suddenly turn on a dime like that.
Characteristics. Well, whatever we need to build it with American characteristics. And I think there's no way we could sell it to the American people without that messaging. The fact that we have our own way of doing things. We don't want to replicate China's economy. We want to take those things that China is doing that we can do, that we like, that are, and then customize them to our own purposes.
Yeah, and we have a tradition of that. And as
最能说明问题的是高铁。美国人常说，我们有车，有高速公路，有飞机，为什么需要高铁？但嘉宾讲了自己的通勤经历，费城到纽约，在美国也算所谓高速走廊， 可往返有时要6个小时。再看中国，上海到北京高铁距离很长，票价大约$90，而且路线从2008年开工，2011年就完成。这不是单纯的交通对比，这是国家能力对比。高铁的意义不只是把人从 A 点送到 B 点，它会带动车站，带动新区，带动产业，带动城市之间的重新分工。一个国家修高铁，本质上是在重新设计时间、空间和经济流动。
50 kilometers an hour to people in America, people say, oh, well, we have cars. Oh, well, we have highways. Oh, well, we fly. What do you say?
Yeah. Well, okay. So I used to commute from Philadelphia to Midtown Manhattan every day on Amtrak. And by car, that's about 2.5 hours if you have no severe traffic. And lots of people drive that every single day for work. But there are a very large number of people that also take Amtrak on the same route, and then they get to Union Station in New York City, and then they walk to their place of work. I did that for almost a year. I got to tell you, that's considered a high-speed corridor. I think officially it's 150 kilometers an hour is what is the high-speed, title. But it's not high speed at all, because sometimes that round trip would take me 6 hours. So 3 hours to work, 3 hours back. It would be faster to drive than to take the car, than to take the train. Sometimes the tracks would overheat. But then what if you had, a bridge problem or traffic problems? If you're in LA, the I-5, all of the different highways, people don't like sitting in traffic. So what we're talking about is long distance. Furthermore, the train that we took from Shanghai to Beijing, it was $90 train. It was started in 2008, the Shanghai to Beijing route. It was completed in 2011. So it's not like it took 50 years to build. The one in Los Angeles, California, it hasn't even got a mile of track. Mexico has more rail that is high speed. Liberia does too, because of the Belt and Road. You can go to Liberia and ride faster trains than in the United States. So there is a convenience and dropping the stress that kind of transportation represents. And if you go to Germany, a very modern country, you can take a little train to a medium station, to a big station. You can crisscross the whole country on rail. You don't have to have a car. I like cars, but there is multiple reasons why you build trains. And the main thing, if you're looking at it from a government standpoint, is it's like 11, families, and I'm sure there are families there. There are people that are doing well, but let's put it this way. What you think of Las Vegas is not what you think of other cities. It's an adult playground, right? So it's not an example for how you would build more cities. That's the difference that I saw with the high-speed rail. And all of that money that we went to keep a handful of banks going was used in a very creative and actually traditionally American idea, because we helped to build railroads in Canada. We helped to build railroads in Mexico historically. We helped to build the Trans-Siberian Railroad. That was the American idea. We're going to build railroads to free nations. So what I saw in China, aside from the fast development, and by the way, that training to build the country, right? If you're looking at it from just being a regular person, it's convenient.
I have a few questions, but I want to point out some interesting factors that I think a lot of Americans don't know about China's high-speed rail. Firstly, the slowest track I've ever been on that was high-speed rail in China was 150 kilometers an hour, and that was in Tibet, in Xizang. And so I was up there, we were traveling 150 kilometers an hour, and I was like, is this high-speed rail? It's a little slow, but it's still double the speed of most Amtrak in the United States, especially in California. I brought my wife, who's Chinese, to California, and we were taking the highway from San Francisco to the Central Valley. We were going fast, but the other side, all the commuters going into San Francisco for the day's work, it was just backed up. It looked like hours and hours of driving, even though it wasn't even that far. If the highway were clear, you could do the whole thing in 45 minutes. And my wife says, what are these people doing? I said, most of the workers in San Francisco.
A foundation for your private businesses. So there is a flaw to people's understanding of America, which is this idea that everybody that is rich is a self-made millionaire and pulled themselves up by their own bootstraps. I got news for you. That never existed in the United States. Take the most recent example, Elon Musk, whether it's SpaceX, whether it's Tesla, he got huge government grants and government investment. There's nothing wrong with that because the technology, SpaceX is pretty amazing, but it stands on the shoulders of NASA, which over 50 years was a measly $1 trillion. So 1/13 of the bailout for those banks in 2008 over 50 years. Again, power. So I mentioned the Tennessee Valley Authority. I think the quote that I like to think about, or it's not really a quote, but David Lilienthal used to say that electricity was a liberating force that would destroy human drudgery and free human muscles from brutal manual toil. So this is what the state should do, even in the America for the people. And I said, well, that comes from Abraham Lincoln. That was our system. But that's the idea is, that is actually how our government's supposed to function, not strictly as you had posed it, quarterly profits. And by the way, the whole quarterly profit thing, is a scam in and of itself. That is not traditionally how American business used to function either. We used to actually have the idea of long-term investment in the companies. You'd reinvest in your workers' education. You would have research and development budgets. Now we have just-in-time stock in companies.
所以中国高铁不是一个孤立项目，它是发展引擎。美国的问题也不是没有列车，而是很多地方已经不再相信国家应该长期建设。钱可以救银行，可以炒股票，可以做金融衍生品，但一到修铁路、修电网、修核电、修城市，就开始问这个项目盈利吗？季度报表好不好看？嘉宾说得很清楚，有些事本来就应该由国家做，国家做的不是每一件事都要立刻赚钱，而是给私人企业、普通家庭和整个社会打地基。这其实也是美国曾经懂的东西。横贯大陆铁路、田纳西河流域管理局、NASA、航天产业，哪一个不是国家长期投入？就连今天美国人最爱讲的马斯克、SpaceX、特斯拉，也站在政府投资和公共科研的肩膀上。所以别把问题说成中国会国家投资，美国只靠市场。真实情况是，美国以前也懂国家投资，只是后来被短期利润和金融化绑住了。
I had gone to the Soviet Union as a teenager, and I did get in politics back then. So I've worked on a number of presidential campaigns and congressional campaigns over the years. So, who knows?
I love your ideas. I think America could learn a lot from you. I'm really excited to have you on this show. I want to talk about nuclear power, and I want to put this in the context of AI. The United States is extremely competitive in AI. 40% of all stock valuations are related to AI, and yet we're not building power. During your travels, you pointed out that China is currently building 39 nuclear power plants. What lessons are there for us?
That's the future, number one. So if we want to actually move or even just compete, none of the Chinese were against competing with the United States. They're very competitive. So if we want to compete, we at minimum have to match that. So the lessons are, aside from things like the irrational fears that my parents' generation had of nuclear power, I used to travel by 3 Mile Island in Pennsylvania all the time. I never, had a problem that prevent them from building things quickly. So I think we can do that too, and I don't really care what party does it. The needs of the population, the needs of the nation, are there. So therefore we need to figure those things out. And, that's kind of at that time when you say, okay, if we want to compete with China, and I get it, we do, we should, then we should say, okay, let's figure out what it is in the small towns, in the state legislatures, in the federal, law system that, drives the cost so high because we have to make sure that there's not a snail that is killed or, that somebody doesn't hear, some Chongqing, the city proper. and FaceTime with people back here in the United States, and it was high quality. That told me right there. I said, this is unbelievable, because I was going by villages along the river, and I could see they were very small villages. They were not by any means the metropolis of Chongqing or Beijing, where you've got lights and electricity at night and so that really hit home to me, that I could be in the middle of a river. I mean, I can go to the edge of my driveway here in Central Texas, and I lose my internet connection. And even on my phone, the data is slow. So the contrast is unbelievable. And I spend 75. I think I have a cheap service for 1G internet, and I spend $75 a month. I think that the people I spoke to, they spent the equivalent of $1 for higher speed, higher quality, consistent internet in many of these places that I saw. So that's a no-brainer. Well, here's the other thing. Because of the WeChat Pay and the Alipay, which is ubiquitous in those villages, some little old lady selling her little interesting trinket or bag of fruit, and you pay her and it's instantaneous. You can't do that. I mean, yes, we have similar forms of payment, but you need a POS system. You've got to have different things, whereas it's just right there. It's so convenient. She doesn't have to have
in the Himalayas a couple of years ago, under a glacier 5,000 meters above sea level. Yeah, I was FaceTiming people, and I bought some tea there, and some little old lady, there are no villages. I mean, we drove in the forest for a couple hours to get to where we were. Yeah. Little old lady selling tea also, scan this QR code to pay, and it was instantaneous. The way that China brought prosperity to the poorest people in its country is through logistics. There's a phrase in China, you want to get rich, first build a road. But that's not just roads, it's water, it's power, it's telecommunications, it's logistics. Our logistics is sad. When we look at our trains in the United States, there are a few places where we could kind of call it high-speed rail, but if we want to really be building stuff in Oklahoma and shipping it to ports on the seaboard, we need better infrastructure. And I really appreciate what you're doing in terms of reminding Americans, how America became rich in the first place. At one point, the United States had the best infrastructure on the planet.
That's right.
Honestly, that's just not true now.
One of the things that has been a key study point for me on American history was the 1876 centennial in Philadelphia. So this was celebrating 100 years of our existence. And at that centennial hall, you had
接下来更关键的是能源。主持人问了一个非常尖锐的问题。美国现在很热衷于讲 AI， 甚至美国股市相当一部分估值都和 AI 有关。可是 AI 需要电，需要数据中心，需要稳定能源。中国在做什么？中国正在建设39座核电站，这就是竞争的底座。很多人把 AI 理解成算法、模型、芯片和资本估值，但真正落地的时候，它首先要问一个很土的问题：电从哪里来？数据中心建在哪里？输电线路够不够？工业体系能不能配套？如果这些底层东西跟不上，再漂亮的科技叙事也会悬在半空。这就是中国让美国难受的地方。中国不是只在一个领域发力，而是把基础设施、能源、制造业和技术应用放在同一张图里推进。你不能一边说要赢下人工智能时代，一边不建设足够的电力系统；你不能一边喊科技领先，一边让监管、成本、利益集团和地方扯皮，把核电和高铁拖成几十年的工程。中国的优势很多时候不是某一个技术突然领先，而是它能把技术放进一个建设体系里。高铁不是孤立的，核电不是孤立的，数字支付不是孤立的，物流也不是孤立的。最后一段尤其能说明问题。嘉宾说，他在长江附近远离大城市的地方，手机还能顺畅视频通话，村里的老太太卖水果小东西也能扫码收钱。主持人接着说，中国扶贫不是靠一句口号，而是靠道路、水利、电力、电信和物流，这就是想致富先修路的真正含义。这个路不只是公路，也包括电网、通信网、支付系统、物流系统和产业网络。很多人看中国只喜欢看高楼、高铁、大桥，好像这些只是面子工程，但真正厉害的是，这些东西组合在一起以后，改变了普通人接入现代经济的方式。一个偏远地方的人能上网，能收款，能发货，能坐车，能用电，能进入市场，这才叫发展。所以回到开头，美国还能不能追上中国？ 答案不是简单的能或不能。美国当然还有人才、资本、大学、科技公司和创新传统，但如果美国只会把中国当对手，却不愿意承认中国做对了什么，只会喊竞争，却不愿意重新建设，只会追逐季度利润，却不愿意投长期基础设施，那么他追的就不是中国，而是自己失去的那套国家能力。这也是为什么这条素材有传播价值，它不是让中国人自嗨，而是让一个美国人把美国的问题说出来。不是中国挡住了美国，而是美国自己把建设能力、公共投资和长期主义一点点交出去了。所以这期的情绪不是炫耀，而是反差。一个曾经最会建设的国家开始向一个后来者请教怎么建设，这个反差足够尖锐。中国给美国上的这一课其实很朴素，现代化不是靠嘴说出来的，是一条铁路、一座电站、一张网络、一个港口、一个产业链、一套长期规划，一点点建出来的。美国想追上中国，第一步不是打压中国，而是先问问自己，还愿不愿意建设一个真正服务普通人的国家。